Today, I am going to finish up the book Ground, Path, and Fruition by His Eminence Tai Situ Rinpoche. And going to complete discussing these verses that he wrote about Mahamudra meditation. And so the verses start with where I left off, realizing your primordial nature, wandering transforms into wisdom. So before this, we've done a breath meditation, visualizations, prayers, and so forth. And these help us look at our external essence. But now here we just look within. This is very advanced, and it's very difficult to do. The idea is, or the point is, maybe that's a better phrasing, that whatever we experience does not distract us from experiencing this primordial nature. And when that happens, then this wandering mind uh, becomes wisdom. And this primordial nature, of course, is Buddha nature or primordial wisdom, Yeshe. And when you are able to do this, thoughts and emotions are seen as the embodiment of wisdom. Ordinarily, from a confused point of view, we think of our emotions as distractions and not actually their essence being primordial wisdom. But in actuality, at this stage, you realize that isn't something that you have been taught or that you repeat. It is something that you actually experience. And in the Mahamudra lineage supplication, the four dharmas of Gampopa, that one of those verses, the last dharma, the last verse is, grant your blessings that confusion dawns as wisdom. And again, that is what is being pointed at here, that this is expressing this experience of our confusion transforming or dawning as wisdom. And at this point, he is saying that he is not able to do this, but he feels that this is describing the 16th Karmapa, who he was very close to. And this these verses here on Mahamudra are very similar to the slogans in the 7 points of mind training that refer to ultimate bodhicitta. And the slogans are examine the nature of unborn awareness. The second slogan is self-liberate even the antidote. And that is the antidote is examining the nature of unborn awareness. And the third one is rest in the nature of alaya, the essence, the present moment. So this is very similar to these verses that Tai Situ Rinpoche has talked about. A wandering mind looks at still mind, the still mind looks at the still mind. Realizing your primordial nature, wandering transforms into wisdom. So the next verse is criticism and suspicion are caused by hope and fear. Greed comes from fear, hope, and criticism. And he describes suspicion as thinking things are too good to be true. And hope and fear, they kind of live off of each other. You cannot have one without the other. We criticize others due to hope and fear, he says. So that's where how criticism comes into these verses here. So suspicion, thinking that things are too good to be true, and having criticism towards others. These then, you might say, cause hope and fear to arise. Where there's one, there is the other. If you have fear, you hope that what is causing your fear to arise will cease. And if you have hope, you are afraid that what you're hoping for won't happen. And so greed fits in there too. We just want more, more, more. We're not satisfied. So this is what he was getting at by saying criticism and suspicion are caused by hope and fear, and then greed comes from the above: criticism, suspicion, hope, and fear. And the idea with that, going back to greed again, is that we have this very unrealistic idea as a confused sentient being that if we just get what we want, we will be free of fear, we'll be free of hope, we'll be happy, we'll be satisfied, and so on and so forth. And of course, that is an impossibility. So he goes on, they only manifest interdependently. There is nothing to fear, there is nothing to look for. Again, they only are together, that you do not have one without the other. So they are independent or interdependent, not independent. And since they are interdependent, they have no inherent existence. They depend on each other. And of course, they are a product of our ego, our clinging to a self and dualistic thinking. So there is nothing to fear, there is nothing to long for. What he is saying here is that if we know this, that there is not this inherent existence, that we can allow that to help us relax, to let go, to rejuvenate. So that is a very important point, is to relax and let go. The next is about meditation. So wherever you are right now is both the end and the center of space. He is trying to convey here, or he is conveying here, that space has no location. That location is based on substance, and that our minds are both in the middle and at the ends of space at the same time, because our minds are beyond location. And this can help us, you might say, have a broader view to help us open up and not be so claustrophobic in terms of our thinking. Next line is, whatever you look at, listen, taste, smell, or think is Mahamudra. Here is a quote on 271 of my copy of the book, my edition of the book. Everything has everything to do with the ultimate truth. And Mahamudra is the ultimate truth. It's absent in the ultimate truth, that good doesn't come from one source, bad come from another. And it is the same for any other opposites. So anything that we sense with our five senses, and anything that we are thinking, The essence is Mahamudra. The essence is the ultimate. The essence is wisdom, primordial wisdom. Don't hold it. The next verse begins, don't release it, leave it as it is. And this means don't alter whatever arises in any way. Let it come, let it go. Don't restrain it, restrict it, release it or free it or alter it. Just let it come and let it go. All varieties have one taste, free from arising perceptions, is the last verse here about Mahamudra meditation. What this means is that if you practice the 3 previous verses, that everything is the same taste. It is beyond preferences, values, like and dislike. You perceive the equalness of everything. You still see differences, but you perceive the equalness also. And you will experience the outer environment as a pure land, a land that is full of enlightened beings. And the forms are the body of the deity. Sounds are mantra, and all thoughts are the mind of the deity. So he also says that he is not at this level. So this concludes the verses on the actual Mahamudra meditation. Then is the action. The first line of this section is naturally pure and clean. The lotus grows in the mud. So this is talking about our regular activities, our daily activities when we are not on the cushion. So the lotus is a very traditional symbol in Buddhism, and the reason is that the lotus is rooted in mud, yet it blooms beautifully. It is pure, it is fragrant. I know one line in one of the prayers that we do in Yungne is that even water does not stick to the lotus. The point here is even when we are in the middle of the ocean of suffering, of samsara, when you reach this level, you remain pure. That this is talking about renunciation, renouncing clinging and attachment to people, to objects, experiences, and so forth. It doesn't mean that you isolate yourself, but you do not remain attached to these various objects, experiences, and the people in our lives. You don't turn your back on people. You do not renounce people. He talked about the Buddha who left the palace, left his wife and his son and the kingdom and all his subjects to follow a spiritual path. But he said he did not renounce them. He just renounced attachment to them. So this is an important point, that it is renouncing attachment that is important, not renouncing everything, not selling all your property and going to live in a cave somewhere or live on the street. Doing things for other people are important, but not in a dualistic framework. Again, this requires an advanced level of realization. We can, of course, And it's important to have the aspiration to be able to attain this, and then also do some of the necessary work and practices to reach this. But this is what it is like at this level, is that you don't side with one person against another. That if someone causes harm to another person, you have compassion for the person that caused the harm, along with the compassion for the person that was harmed. And this is very different from samsaric compassion, where you choose sides, you might say, and you have compassion for the person that was harmed and the person that caused the harm. You have aversion for, maybe even anger, maybe even wishing that harm comes to them. The next verse is serve others out of respect for their potential. Where this compassion is rooted is that the person knows that these beings that are suffering are actually undeveloped Buddhas. They know the essential nature of all beings, and that it is Buddha. But these beings do not recognize their potential, and therefore they are behaving frequently very badly. A quote on page 274, whatever we do, we will do out of service to an unenlightened Buddha. So this type of compassion is, it's free of pity. It is done with great respect for the subject of compassion. And this occurs through our devotion to the Buddha and through our realization. So, two wrong approaches to compassion are pity, where you are holding yourself above the object of compassion, or B, where you are siding and you have a lot of compassion for a person that is suffering, and then revulsion, aversion, and even anger towards a person that is causing the suffering. The next verse is provide whatever you can for the benefit of the recipient. So feeling good when it helps is fine, but that's not the reason for helping. The accumulation of merit happens from your actions, but again, that is not the reason for benefiting others. So if you focus on either of these, that becomes a problem. That we are thinking of the benefit of other beings in our compassionate actions. The last verse in this section is about action. We reach the ultimate service when the server and recipient become one. So at this level, when the server and the recipient become one, duality has been eliminated, and the person has experienced emptiness and is now on what are called the bodhisattva levels. This is when you have actually recognized your Buddha nature. So then the last part of these verses is about fruition. The great primordial Dharma space is filled with limitless wisdom, like the always pure space filled with countless galaxies of stars. What he means here is that when we realize the Dharmakaya, the space around us becomes the other two kayas. The Dharmakaya is a formless kaya. It is beyond description. It is beyond conception. Others cannot perceive the Dharmakaya because it has no form. The other two kayas are form kayas. They are the Sambhogakaya and the Nirmanakaya. So here the Sambhogakaya manifests to highly realized beings. So a being that is on these bodhisattva levels, the bhumis, can see these highly realized beings and receive teachings from them. And then the Nirmanakaya manifests in a physical form that ordinary beings can see. And so the form bodies are for the benefit of other beings. The Dharmakaya, since other beings are not aware of them and can't see them, you achieve that for your own benefit. The conclusion then is the ultimate is beyond description, but we use relative ideas to describe it. Therefore, the descriptions are not completely accurate, and our view needs to be constantly evolve. So the relative is pointing the finger at the moon. We have to avoid thinking things like, now I've got it. That what we need to do is have the attitude of, I need to know more, that our knowledge is incomplete. I am more of a beginner than an expert. I like the word he used, upgrade your understanding. I think that's very appropriate in this context. And that the lineage that we are associated with is unbroken and is alive, that this guarantees our upgrade as long as we maintain our connection. And he also uses the word or the phrase progressive transformation. And I think that is a very important phrase, that's what this is all about, is transforming progressively, little by little. The next is, as you climb the stairs of this house, you reach towards liberation. With each step, your view, meditation, and action progress. As this happens, your realization will also progress. So I went to the glossary here, and this kind of sums up what he has been talking about here with view, meditation, and action. And here is a quote of the explanation of those words. The philosophical orientation, the act of growing accustomed to that, usually in sitting practice, and the implementation of that insight during the activities of daily life. Each of the two vehicles has its particular definition. Three vehicles has its particular definition of view, meditation, and action. So that kind of summarizes some of the points that were in that poem. And the view and the ground are similar. So chapters 1 through 3 of this book talk about the view and the ground. They are about understanding the teachings of the Buddha, history of Buddhism, and then Buddhist philosophy. Meditation is all the different practices that he discusses, including Chenrezig. And plus, there are many others that he does not cover in the book. Tibetan Buddhism is very rich in various practices that are frequently in this category of meditation. And then action is implementing these two into our daily lives. And remember that the goal is to ultimately attain Buddhahood and relatively to progress along the path. Then he has a dedication section here. And so this will complete the book. So here he talks about what he hopes the outcome of the teachings and the book will bring. He just mentions the teachings, the book came later, but obviously he will have the same wish, you might say, about the book as he did about the teachings. Quote, "From these teachings, we will climb the steps of the house of liberation to Buddhahood, and from our view, meditation, and action will progress on the way." And he mentions that all of this wisdom comes from the lineage and the teachers, including specifically the 16th Karmapa. Again, as a young boy, he fled Tibet. He was born in 1954, and I believe in 1959 is when he fled. And he was brought to Serpu, which the 16th Karmapa established his headquarters at. And he was brought there and basically brought up by the 16th Karmapa. And Tai Situ Rinpoche was also the one in charge of discovering the 17th Karmapa. This is a long tradition, by the way, of the main students of a great teacher will be the ones that lead the search for the rebirth. And Tai Situ, for many, many, many lifetimes, has had a very close student-teacher relationship with the Karmapas. He mentions, too, that he tries to avoid contaminating these pure teachings with his own interpretations, and this is what keeps these teachings pure. It's very obvious that devotion is extremely important. When you get to the level of Mahamudra meditation, you could say it is the most important part of the whole practice. And devotion is wanting to be like your teacher or teachers. This is a very important point. What sometimes happens is Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche used the term stalking the guru. And that is, you go to a guru, not to become like him, but to get some bit of information, a practice, a blessing, or something from the guru. But then once you get it, then you go on and leave the guru, that you don't have the devotion. You don't look at the teacher as a respected teacher. So it's very, very important to have this devotion. You really cannot progress without it in the Mahamudra practices. Then he says, the child of the Garuda and the lion will be greater than their parents. The point here is that historically, it has been very common for the students to attain a higher level of realization than their masters. And Garuda might be a little, you might be a little unfamiliar with Garuda, but the Garuda is a legendary bird that is very strong, very brave, and so on and so forth. Just like a lion is very strong and very brave. The point is that the offspring of the lion and the Garuda can be even greater than their parents. He says, quote here, "I sincerely hope that you can attain Buddhahood before I do, and then I can become one of your disciples." Now that is a very humble statement. And he is not saying this just to say it, that I have no doubt that this was sincere. As you travel the path and your realization deepens, humility develops too. This is a very important quality, in fact. So then he dedicates merit to his masters, and he mentions the Dalai Lama first and the Karmapa second, and then all the great masters. And again, it is through these beings, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, in all these great masters of the past, that have kept this lineage alive, kept these teachings alive, kept Buddhism alive, a living religion rather than something that an archaeologist might study, or someone that is studying dead languages. He then wishes peace and harmony to the local area, the neighboring countries, and the whole world. And it's interesting that he mentions that the cultures of India and China, which are very great, quote, two great civilizations, have supported Tibet like two pillars. That Buddhism came from India and Indian masters. And also there was a strong influence from China. One of the early Buddhist kings, in fact, had a wife who came from China, as well as, I think, a Nepali wife. And many of the earlier Karmapas were very close to Chinese emperors, the Mongol emperors. So there has been a lot of input from both cultures, China and India, and he's acknowledging that here. And then he says, may there be peace in the entire world. May the Buddhas bless and purify the karma that causes war, fighting, famine, natural disasters, incurable diseases. This was before COVID, but obviously that is included in terms of it might be curable, but it still is a pandemic and is killing a lot of people worldwide. Then may humanity, that's the word he used, humanity, realize that we are the same and equal in basic needs, that we all want happiness, food, clothing, shelter. We want to stay alive, and no one wants to suffer. And then he mentions active peace. Quote, it means constantly trying to fix this and that, here and there, so that we can remain in peace. That because of impermanence, we need to pay constant attention, see what needs fixing, and fix it. If you don't see it, it doesn't get fixed. And then he mentions briefly that all religions lead to one ultimate destination. There cannot be three or four ultimate destinations. So he throws in a little bit of, and this again is very common to the teachings of the Buddha, and that is that all religions come from the same place and they lead to the same destination. Then he says he tries to stay out of politics, economics, and quote, these kinds of things, that he says they're none of his business. And I once heard him say that I will leave politics up to the politicians, when he was asked a question about what to do about the situation in Tibet and the Chinese occupation. And this was back in the mid-90s, a long time ago. But that was his answer. Now, one of the books that we studied earlier in this book class was books of the Karmapa, and the Karmapa has a slightly different view. He feels that it's important to be aware of issues and to do things to try to improve the world, like for environmental reasons, that he might not say do this or do that, but at least recognize the economic inequality and so forth, the problems that we have in the world today. So the last sentence kind of sums up this idea of active peace. Quote, in our own ways, each of us can contribute to the betterment of humanity. The question was about hope and fear in our daily lives. And so I'm going to give a little plug here. Next Saturday at 3 o'clock, my topic is working with fear. And I will talk about this in terms of on a daily level for us ordinary beings. What he is talking about is this is the direction that we go in as we progress along the path, that eventually you become fearless, that the source of fear is our ego and the suffering that we experience. This is what causes fear. And so when you realize the first bodhisattva level, the first bhumi, you realize emptiness, and at least you get a glimpse of no self, and as a result, no fear. The first bhumi is actually called the joyful one, because all of a sudden, at least you, for a brief moment, this fear is gone. And we are so used to it that it's like the air that we breathe. We're not even aware of it. So that is how the path, where the path leads. But until you get there, of course, we have to work with it skillfully.